Hello everybody and welcome back to Blockchain Won't Save the World. It's another Students React video and we're going long haul today. We've got students from New Zealand who are going to talk through three really different and really interesting projects and give you their perspectives on what they're already working on in blockchain technology. It's early for me, it's late for them, but we're still hopefully going to put together a really good show. We've got Troy, Abhinaw and Mina. We're going to talk about three different projects: Cardano, Monax, and property management. Troy, let's start us off. Give us some introduction into who you are, what you're studying, and let's get straight into the show.
Great, thanks, Anthony. I appreciate it. Thank you for the time to be able to share. And so I'm Troy Egan. So I'm studying here at the University of Auckland here in New Zealand, and the area I'm studying in is looking at how peer-driven production can be applied to the transmedia storytelling space. So that's big franchises and how they tell stories across different media forms. And so that got me into the topic of discussion that I'm bringing to the table today. And so that's Project Catalyst, and this is on the Cardano blockchain. And this was a project that came on my radar probably about middle of last year, July 2020. So I've been doing research on different crypto platforms and particularly interested in the idea of distributed funding and how this might disrupt, the typical entrepreneurial route of trying to self-fund or, build up price points through your own products or go through VCs. And so I was real fascinated to find there was a project in development at the time that was community driven and open to the idea of this new form of blockchain governance. And so what is Project Catalyst? It's a series of experiments which seeks to generate the highest levels of community and innovation. Catalyst is bringing on-chain governance to the Cardano blockchain by allowing the community to self-determine priorities for growth. And it also lets participants deploy funding to proposals which tackle challenges and capitalize on opportunities. And So to do this, they've deployed a series of funds over 6 weeks, starting, I think, fund August of 2020 was when they first did an experimental fund and started kicking off the project. So in its history, it was a public fund developed by IOHK, founded on the Cardano blockchain. It's the first developed by IOHK, which supports the scalability, interoperability and sustainability needed for real-world applications. So when they launched the Cardano token, which we know as ADA, a portion of that was put aside and planning to be implemented to be able to grow out the blockchain and various developments on there with the power of the community. So having community input in terms of what they were going to be able to propose and also be able to vote on. So the CEO of Cardano Foundation describes Cardano is democratizing the process of consensus and governance. And its long-term vision is to enable the economic empowerment for those who need it most. So they do have a vision on how we are able to support developing nations in the world and provide platforms and opportunities for them. So Cardano's Catalyst funds, again, they're 6 weekly. So Fund 1, they tend to double in value over time as well. So Fund 1 being experimental had 0 funds. Fund 2 had $250,000 US in the funding kitty. Then Fund 3 went up to 500,000. Fund 4 is at $1 million, and currently we're up to Fund 8, which is still in the proposal phase, and that's currently up to $16 million. So it's projected that over every 6-week period that the fund will be doubling in value. So there's a possibility in 6 weeks' time we'll be looking at the launch of Fund 9, which would be relatively around 32 million, which is a fund that communities around the world can vie for through proposals. And the last fund, which was Fund 7, 269 projects were funded. These funds are held in the treasury as a percentage of the ADA minted, and that initially was put aside, and in the future vision is being able to take that funding out of fees from stake activity. So it's a proof of stake blockchain. And so some of the funds will be a type of tax, I guess, and that'll be put back into the kitty for future Catalyst funding rounds. So what it's doing at the moment, So just a general breakdown, for instance, of Fund 8, which is just, still rolling out at the moment. So registration for that began on January 6th of this year. So then you have submissions open that for the general public on February 24th. They will close on roughly March 3rd. So people were able to put in proposals recently, and now they're in a review process. So people are refining the proposals, then they'll be finalizing them next week, and then they'll close. After that, the community will be able to vote in April 14th, and then the voting process will end in April the 28th. So roughly that 6-week period is generally from the registration process through to the voting end. And then rewards are distributed. So there's various forms of incentivization in the program around how people are able to receive rewards for voting, receive rewards for being community advisors, and community advisors' roles are basically give feedback and support to proposals that are in the pool at the time. And each fund has a different focus area. So these have been building out over time. So as the funds are getting bigger, they're able to attach more different focus areas. So for instance, the key areas of focus are developer ecosystems. So building out ecosystems within the network, building out dApps and integrations within the network, having initiatives around distributed decision-making, having proposer outreach and catalyst onboarding programs, metadata challenges, and then specialist sort of campaigns that roll out, including ones around growing out Cardano in Africa or multilingual resources. So in terms of participation, there's various ways to participate from the get-go. So a person could go to cardano.ideascale.com right now and be able to start instantly participating in the process. That may include entering a proposal of your own. So if a person has an idea that they think will be of benefit, either to grow out the blockchain, grow out Cardano in terms of sharing it with communities, or even if they've just got a good idea they think will be of social benefit to the world, there's an opportunity to be able to do that through the proposal process. And the key is kind of tying your proposal to the campaign requirements, whatever they're looking for. And then there's the opportunity to be a community advisor. So if you're not putting in a proposal, you can be a community advisor, give feedback about the proposal process. You can also, there's a referrer program as well, where it's incentivized for people to go out and reach out and say, hey, I heard about your idea, like one of you guys, I heard about your idea tonight. Why don't you try this out on Cardano and see if that might work out as well. And also the voting system is also part of the way that we can participate, which just requires having a Cardano ADA wallet and going through a registration process. So yeah, where might Catalyst go? What are some of the pros and cons? So the transfers of the wealth to the doers and to the reviewers and the maintainers of the system is kind of one of the slogans that's come up through Dor. Now Dor, he's head of product governance. He's someone we've been watching since the beginning. He's been a person who's helped lead and guide the community from when it had 50,000. I think actually the way I got involved in it was in about Fund 3. We started putting in some proposals around that time. Some of the proposals were successful, and so what tended to happen is there's be a weekly town hall. So you'd sit in on this town hall and get together, and different successful funds will be able to share about what they've been up to and how they're progressing on their projects. And then you get updates about what's happening in the space coming up. So that's a weekly town hall that's constantly happening. It's on YouTube for Project Catalyst. So that's a way we can get updates. And it's kind of good because they outline right at the beginning, they kind of got the slogan that they have as a part of it. It's welcome to the experiment. Just remember that things may break, they may lack documentation, they may differ greatly between iterations, they may disorient, overload, and inspire, which is just this constant reminder that we're persisting in this experimental space. From my experience, we're working on a project for 5 months. I had to kind of like step back from the project for various reasons. The main one being to keep up work on my PhD. That was getting way behind. But just going from the beginning of a project where everyone has an idea, you're jumping into a pool with a group of people you've never met before. everyone's putting up their hands and there's a lot of enthusiasm. And then as you progress through a project, you notice when you're hitting different hurdles that it can be quite a challenge to find ways to equitably try to navigate everyone's needs within the space as well, which has its difficulties. But the good thing about Project Catalyst is it has kind of been founded on that ethos from the beginning. So this community is about experimentation. It's about working together. It's about being able to support the network and being able to be funded for it. I think that's one of the exciting benefits about Project Catalyst for me is it provides people all over the world this democratized opportunity to enter the blockchain space, to forward ideas, even if it's not your ideas, to contribute to other people's ideas, and possibly to be able to get that funded and see where that might go. So yeah, so I've been part of this for over a year, stood back, but I'm very interested in watching the development of Project Catalyst. I recommend people just checking it out and seeing, you know, what's sort of happening in the Cardano space. I'm interested also in seeing what crossovers it has and what other blockchains are doing something similar. So that's just a bit about Project Catalyst and my involvement. So yeah, thank you.
Brilliant start, Troy. Thank you so much for that. And genuinely really, really interesting model. I mean, you asked other blockchains doing this. I mean, the concept of having a treasury and growing and scaling the ecosystem is pretty common to most of the large layer ones and layer twos. And if you look at some of the funding that's being made available, you know, the treasuries for some of these protocols are, you know, near enough $1 billion to go and spend. I mean, when you talk about the kind of doubling and doubling and doubling, and we're up to 16 or $32 million now, that's not small change, right? That's, you know, venture capitals, you know, or some of the early stage guys don't bring anywhere near that. So from my perspective, it's really interesting. I'm wondering, it feels like we're starting to get into the realms of decentralized autonomous organizations, so DAOs. This to me feels at this stage like a process where you've got incentivization, you've got automation, you've got voting around allocation of funds. But some of the themes or some of the concepts of what Cardano wants at this time is being driven from themselves rather than the community, right? At this time, they're still dictating what they would like to have developed because they can see how it's all shaping up. And maybe that's not as well known to everybody else in the ecosystem. But as you've been involved with Project Catalyst, or you've been on the town halls and doing some of the reading and listening, is this kind of a precursor to Cardano being fully autonomous and decentralized as a protocol? Or is where do you see this direction of travel at the moment?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So yeah, Cardano's essentially started out in a centralized sort of model of governance. And so in their roadmap, they've got these 5 stages that are progressing over a series of roughly 5 years or so. We're in the middle stage, sort of, and they're named after famous mathematicians within the space. And so we're in the Gauguin sort of phase. And this is the era of smart contracts, and there's all these sub phases. So the phase we're working up to is Basho, which is the 5th stage in the roadmap, and that's around full decentralization. This is handing over the reins of Project Catalyst to the community. And so even now, you know, we're seeing this sort of process where it is very community and human centric. So the decision making can be quite messy. You know, we're trying to navigate a space which, as you know, crypto can be quite a, you know, controversial in terms of who's got opinions and who's got factions. So there's all the human element that goes on with it. And I think there is this, you know, in the blockchain, especially when you're speaking about DAOs, is this sort of this hope and ideal, and the notion of having a machine-driven consensus mechanisms and contracts where we can just jump in and the system's already organized and we just play our part and participate. So Project Catalyst isn't up to that yet. We're still very much in this proposal driven, hey, I think this is a problem, here's how we could solve it. And so you've got this mesh of basically a competitive environment where people are in an environment for contestable funding. And so, you know, there may potentially be, and I'm interested in seeing, you know, around this fund and the upcoming fund, about what sort of shifts are we going to be looking at in terms of scalability, in terms of what size funding packages proposals can ask for. Because up until now, we'd be looking at probably the max proposal funds I'd seen previous had been something around the 150,000 mark for a project. And some of the levels of scalability we're looking at, require just a multitude of different resources. And because the space is what it is, innovation in areas that haven't been, that are new frontiers that haven't been open yet. So I'm interested to see what that's going to mean in terms of larger scale projects coming on, because I imagine in terms of scalability, we're going to have to start looking at some bigger scale projects and how they will be pitched within the community. At the moment, people will put in a little fund for this part of the project, a little fund for that part of the project, and we're also looking around quality assurance as a issue that's been popping up, and how do we ensure that the KPIs are being met in an efficient manner, and all those sort of issues are still being worked out on the human scale. And so, yeah, I'm very interested to see how it's developing. And just to conclude, yes, you're right. Even Cardano Foundation stepped up recently to say, look, because we're part of the ecosystem, we are putting our votes on the table. We are going to have a vote in the system, and they'll outline that it's going to be this amount of ADA. So, and we'll only vote on these particular topics. So they don't put in proposals or votes around just the general campaigns out there. Their main focus is in the future direction, and that's around the community development proposals. So they've outlined, yes, we are still going to maintain a vote, but they're quite transparent about what areas that will affect.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Really interesting to see this one develop. I mean, as with Cardano, I mean, they are famous for empirical, staged, peer-reviewed, very deliberate moves, and this journey isn't done. There's clearly a huge amount more to do, but really interesting start. I'm going to bring in Abhinaw and Mina. Guys, do you have any questions for Troy, or do you like what you've heard? What are your reflections on Project Catalyst and the work that they're doing?
Sounds really interesting, I would say. I knew about Cardano, but I never knew about this side of the community proposals and so on. Well, the idea just comes to my mind at the moment is what kind of proposals are out there. I think I just want to have a look at that and see what kind of discussions go on. And the process does sound fairly fair in terms of how much Cardano is involved in terms of their proposals, what they're looking at. So yeah, that sounds interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Roy.
Thanks, Abhinaw.
Same here. Very interested to hear about a new domain that I haven't known about that before. However, I just have a little bit question about the whether so a lot of funding around with the project. So whether the volatility of the cryptocurrency impact on the outcome of this project, and then for whether it impact on the expected returns for the community.
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, one of the way they factor that into the funding process is that they peg. So when we are making a proposal, it's in US dollars. So we're not looking for funding proposals, whether they're in ADA or a cryptocurrency. So it's in US dollars, but because there is a period of time between when the proposal is submitted and when the voting rounds finish, that amount will still be given to the successful proposer in ADA at the agreed upon amount that they had proposed for. So that means it just takes up the slack. So if ADA goes higher, then you get less amount of ADA, or if ADA goes lower, then you'll get more amount of ADA, but it'll be equal to the US amount that you would ask for in the proposal. Yes, and I'm guessing each proposal will have to have a strategy around how to manage its funds when it comes in. So we've got a range of individuals making proposals, and then you'll have whole teams who are already established on other ecosystems or outside of blockchain. So each of them will have to have some sort of strategy. At the moment, the strategy the group I was part of was to stake. So we'd agreed that whatever funds are sitting there, we'd just allow that to stake while it's doing its thing until further notice, I guess. And but yeah, that's kind of how the approach has been so far, Mina.
Thank you very much.
Really interesting. And here obviously the breaking down of project economics is one thing, but actually the volatility or the potential kind of downside, upside, and then also the staking benefits on top. If you're getting staking rewards and upside in your project once you've got the allocation, really good news for you guys, and that funds can go further. Other way around, right? As we've seen lately, we see a little bit of a dip, things go down, but at least you've got the US dollar. I don't want to say real world because that suggests that crypto doesn't exist in the real world. It's not magical internet money. It does have a value, but the volatility there can be offset because you're pegging it to something that people still pay their taxes, their mortgages, and their groceries in for the time being. So when we live in a world where everything is paid for in ADA, it might become a slightly different way of thinking about it. But hopefully things will be less volatile by that stage.
Yeah, I agree.
Brilliant. Troy, one absolutely awesome start to the show. Abhinaw, I'm going to bring you in next. I believe you want to talk about Monax. Take it away.
Right, great. Thanks, Anthony. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Abhinaw. First of all, full disclaimer, I am not a programmer or a developer, and my educational background is mainly civil engineering and construction project management. I really got into blockchain research after BRANS, which is the New Zealand's Building Research Association, mentioned about how they were interested in researching to understand where blockchain can change the construction industry. And since then, I've been exploring blockchain technology for information systems, mainly in construction projects, and which has been the subject of my PhD research for a few years now. Okay, so the blockchain project that I want to talk about is called Monax, as Anthony mentioned. And before I get into it, I want to give you a heads up on what I'll be covering. So in the next few minutes, I'll share what is Monax, why does it exist, and of course, how does it work? And finally, what does the future of Monax look like, and what does this mean for us? Right, so let's get into it. What is Monax? Well, Monax is essentially a contracts lifecycle management platform that is powered by blockchain. So it is not really a technical innovation in terms of the blockchain science of things, but what is interesting about it is the application of the technology itself. It was founded by Cassie Cullman in 2014, who's got a background of basically, he's a lawyer and also a software engineer with some experience in legal process management, smart contracts, and DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. So yeah, that's something about Monax. So why does it exist? So what problem does it solve? Well, today's legal agreements are quite complex with legal terms which can get quite convoluted. And anyone who's pretty much worked in any industry can just try and recall a typical client contract agreement, and you can just imagine that the thought itself is a bit painful. So what Monax does is it replaces the age-old physical paper-bound contracts with smarter digital alternatives. So it lets essentially businesses create bite-sized agreements that are easy to deploy and track over their life cycle. So it allows the automation of tasks also, like for payment, renewals, approvals, and so on. So essentially what it offers is, at the end of the day, that businesses have more efficient workflows that they operate in. So the next question, how does it work? So let's talk about it in terms of the front end, and then get to what's under the hood. So as a non-programmer, what I find is the best part about Monax is that it doesn't start with me opening Microsoft Visual Code or what I use Atom, but it starts from something like Microsoft Word documents, which is essentially where the contracts were originally written. So that's how it kind of deals with things. And it also currently, it is integrated with tools like Google Drive and also automation tools like Zapier, making it accessible to thousands of online tools for creating these work processes. So under the hood, so the developers at Monax have kind of built something called as a business process modeler, which translates legal agreements, that the ones that we know, into computer code. And it connects individual terms of the agreements to smart contracts on the blockchains. Therefore, based on these smart contracts, it can essentially facilitate the automation of the complex agreements, which have multiple dependencies, and then as an event kind of trigger the on-chain transactions, which needs to happen. So their contract lifecycle management system is natively built on-chain. And a fun fact is that actually Monax introduced world's first permissioned smart contracting system for enterprise called Hyperledger Burrow in 2014. And so Monax is powered by this blockchain, which is essentially a proof of stake mechanism. And it can also be configured to kind of interoperate with both public and private blockchains. And since last year, Monax is now connected to other public blockchains like Ethereum through something what they call as a beacon that's kind of proprietary to them. So that's kind of how Monax functions. Now, getting to the last part of my section, which is what is the future of Monax and why should we care? Well, Monax is mainly targeted towards small to medium-sized businesses. It kind of provides the ability for these businesses to self-onboard onto their platforms, in contrast to something similar, which is DocuSign, which charges about thousands of dollars to start using their products. And as a matter of fact, DocuSign has now kind of changed their focus from small to medium to larger enterprises. So this is perfect for if that's what you're, then it's perfect that you use Monax. Also, it has got a very simple front end that you can use, and it can also be leveraged within your existing workflows, and it kind of gives that guarantee that there's low code integration that is needed. Another thing that is it has ventured into is linking the legal agreements to NFTs. All of us know NFTs at the moment now, and what Monax believe is that NFTs essentially are properties or assets, and assets have always been secured by agreements, which always been, lost my chain of thought there, by agreements. And so as NFTs move from this digital art to decentralized finance, and now they're moving towards tokenized real world property, Monax wants to help users kind of secure those high value assets on chain using their platform and the services. So they kind of are trying to build this middle layer between the legal system and the smart contracts that go on the blockchain. And so what is it planning for the future? And so essentially they're working on tackling issues around token distributions, and we know how crazy that can get, and trying to bring some legal ground to that. And also they're looking at powering the decentralized autonomous organizations, which are kind of considered as the service layer of this new Web3 that is coming up. So that's what Monax project is about, and it has been really exciting for me because construction projects are known for these gigantic legal documents, and something like this, when you can break it down into small pieces of contracts that go on the blockchain and have that business processes efficiency improve, that is something which is amazing on construction projects. It improves not only the time, the productivity, but also kind of kicks in that cash flow, which has always been an issue in construction projects. Yeah, hopefully that gives you a reasonably good understanding of Monax and its purpose. Thank you so much.
Absolutely brilliant. Another fascinating one here. And I mean, this one hits me in a few different levels, because you've got the construction industry, which is large, complex, multifaceted, huge, big program managers, governments, right down to individual, small, SMEs, tradespeople working on projects. So the level of digitization is going to be massively varying top to bottom. I'll come back to that in a minute. You've got a hybrid blockchain, right? So for those working B2B, you've still got the permission nature of knowing who you're dealing with, but at the same time, it's not a blockchain if it isn't public, some might say. So you've actually got the crossover of it there. Particularly, you're starting to talk about DAOs. You've got securitization of contracts, right? So the ability to tokenize an agreement that you have to be able to get funding for your business ahead of time. Super interesting. The legal element of it as well. So you're getting into kind of code is law, smart contracts, are enabling the facilitation of things happening. These are all the components, I think, of things we love about working in blockchain and Web3. The challenge for me, right, and this is the one where why there's so much research being poured into this, is that the construction industry in general is historically very, very manual. Very different degrees of digital maturity, from the project managers at the top, down to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of SMEs working on the projects at the bottom. and some more complexity underneath that as well, in terms of, depending on how ethical you see this, but a lot of contracts will be managed through disputes. So actually the ability for the layer one or the tier one contractors to actually delay payments, to squeeze those further down on the project, there's an incentive for them not to be transparent. There's an incentive for them not to be as digital and mature and efficient as possible, because that affects their margin. So
Sure.
there's some human dynamics, there's some professional dynamics in there as well, which I'm not suggesting that every construction project out there is bent. I'm not suggesting that this is a project everywhere all of the time, but the fact that Monax are showing how that can work, or that there is a way of doing this, and it is legally sound, it is integratable into things like Microsoft Word or basic workflows that we already have, that we can have non-technical people build contracts that are simple, that have simple rules using things like Word. It's really, really great for me. I love this stuff, genuinely. So Abhinaw, thank you very much for that. Really, really great. That's my 10 cents. But Troy, Mina, do you guys want to come in on this one? Get any thoughts, reactions, reflections? What do you guys think?
Yeah, if I could just share some. So I think a big thing for me, even spending some time in the Cardano space has been this idea of adoption. You'd mentioned that there's various levels of digital adoption within the construction space. So for yourself, Abhinaw, what are some of the hurdles or challenges you've seen in terms of adoptability, in the space? Is this going to be restricted to certain tiers of workers within construction, or is there opportunities for greater adaptability in terms of the types of dApps that are being created? What sort of opportunities or hurdles do you see in terms of adoption for people within the construction industry?
Sure. No, yeah, that's a very good question, and I'll just pick up from where Anthony left in terms of his comments. One of the things that we always talk about is, which you mentioned, construction industry is one of those industries which is very hard to kind of move into that digital space. And I believe, at a certain point, I believe that it is the industry which is not picking it up. Later realized that, in fact, we're the second worst industry in that aspect. The first one is the legal industry. It was a few more paces behind the construction industry in terms of the digitization and so on. But yeah, Troy, good question there. And that is actually one of the things that I'm looking into in my research as well, because my research is mainly about the application of blockchain itself. And I really don't have enough credentials to kind of research the science of blockchain itself. Having said that, one of the things that has kind of promoted a lot of digital revolution, automation within the construction space, if I can probably add within construction manufacturing space, is that the idea of digital twins, which has come up, and that is a huge driver for the fact of the thought that you first build something digitally before you build the thing physically. And that kind of promotes this idea of, now you've got this digital document or digital model that you're associating your whole facility you're building or the product that you're building. And once you have that, it kind of opens up many channels for connecting it with technologies such as IoT and blockchain and so on. So this is something which is a wheel in motion. Obviously, like you said, the industry is, well, in New Zealand at least, it's kind of a few paces back. The leaders within this segment or within this sector of digitization, I would look at, is probably the UK or the US, where there is a lot of more traction in terms of getting this digital processes in place and integrating other tools around it. The most important hurdles which I've seen for construction industry is mainly the industry kind of always looks at what the other people are doing. When I'm in the industry, the users within the industry. And what I've kind of realized when I've spoken to people around in the industry is, if somebody else, or if there is an ex contractor or a consultant who's using certain service, then they would think about doing it. And that's why there's always some leaders, and then there are these laggards who kind of follow them. So because of the traditional nature of the industry, I feel it comes down to the people who need to make those decisions about what needs to be adopted to kind of for the industry to move forward. And well, needless to say, the finances are always the guiding point. As long as something shows that there is profit, there is enough, you know, I don't know what to call it, but yeah, something that really improves their financial statement, then that is when things start to, you know, take real shape in the industry. So yeah, does it answer your question, I guess?
Yeah, thank you for that.
No problem.
I think the idea of coding the law into the smart contract is really cool, but I think it's also a real challenge as well, because the law is not A equal to B. The law has a lot of exception, a lot of charter, and then sub-articles. So I think it's possible, but it's also challenging with that part. And then I think the syncing between the actual laws and the law that will be coded into the smart contract going to be a quite challenging process. So this is my comment. Yep. Thank you for sharing.
No, that's absolutely true. Before I close, Anthony, just to comment on that. In fact, so one of the things that I've spoken about with other colleagues about smart contracts, or even the idea of converting this traditional contracts into smart contracts, is if you boil down a traditional contract, it kind of comes down to that essence of if-then statements, like how you would write a program. And so that is what needs to be the guiding, idea behind of that conversion from the traditional contracts to smart contracts. How do you make sure that you get to a point where you can interpret those contracts to very simple if-then statements, which then could be, you know, coded into a smart contract? That's very important. I think another thing is, for many activities or many events that happen in a construction project, you have external information which kind of validate the events or trigger following events. So those need to be, there needs to be a mechanism. Well, an easy example is IoT devices, which can then, you know, probably track progress on a construction site and then send back information to the smart contract, which can then trigger the next event or the next stage of the project of the contract. So yeah, that's something which is a very plausible idea for looking at getting from what we have at the moment to something which is more automated and which runs on smart contracts on blockchain. So yeah, thank you.
Very good, very good. Another really interesting one. And again, it comes down to the application of technology in the real world and our ability to define things clearly. And like you said, you're picking two of the least digitized industries to then start with blockchain or start applying blockchain technology into. Super, super interesting and really interesting to follow the research, and please do keep us posted with how you think this is rolling out or any exciting projects and initiatives that happen in New Zealand or further afield, because the more we can see great examples of what's happening, the more people will believe it's possible and the more we can get those things rolled out. Mina, you've been waiting patiently. Really interested to hear more about the work that you're doing. The floor is yours. Please take it away.
Sure, thank you very much. Firstly, thank you for offering me this opportunity to meet new people and talk about the blockchain. My name is Mina. I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of Information System and Operation Management at the University of Auckland. And I have been developing blockchain-based solutions for property management. Today, that's why I'm excited to talk about one of the blockchain application in the property management that have been implemented and used by the government, UK government, the Digital Trees project. And this project had been carried on by the HM Land Registry, which is a department of the UK government. And the HM Land Registry, they affirm that they exploring how blockchain technology could be used to provide quicker and simpler services. However, they don't disclose the details of their project. So lots of my talk today might be just a guess of my understanding. And because I have been working on the similar things, solutions for property management, so I just guessing. So please feel free to correct me after or discuss with me. And then So in this project, they intend to use blockchain applications such as distributed ledgers, smart contract, and they expect that it can fundamentally change the land registration and property buying selling process. And they choose blockchain because of its of some unique feature of the technology. For example, the security, privacy, interaction ability, and the smart contract, they said, initially designed for financial services only, could be excellent fit to be expanded to do the transaction for the land registration and also buying, selling property as well. So the first question come to my mind is why the UK government chose to launch this project, because blockchain is quite new technology that the government still fund and started to implement a project, which still quite a lot of controversies around blockchain. Then I think trace back to the history, London was one of the earliest international financial center. So this project is potentially a trial for the establishment of a novel international property trading center. So it is possible that an HM land registry is a government department. So they have been execute agency and trading funds, and its running costs are covered by the fees paid by the user of its services. So by launching a new international property trading center, they also can improve the fees paid and expand their services to become the world leading land registry. So because they did not provide the detail of the description, so in my opinion, this land registry system will allow participants to carry on both the buying, selling land transaction and registration for the ownership as well. So in this case, tokens, they might use it for not only encrypt the information of the transactions, but they might use it as a financial tool to make the payment as well. However, in their statement, they also mentioned that the bank is going to be one of the participants of the system. So which means they doesn't eliminate the existence of the bank. So in this case, probably they also allow the traditional way of payments, with the bank only be the third party for for finalizing the transactions. So I think there's pros and cons of this type of application of blockchain. The pros, of course, we know that blockchain has multiple advantages, right? Such as immutability, traceability, privacy, interacting between peer reviews, and when implementing blockchain technology, the digital trees project take on all the advantage. So, but however, I think there's quite a lot of risky in building up such a project with regarding the land registration, and also when expanded into a large scales because of some concerns. For example, the immutability, whether it is real immutability, we need to think about it, right? Because it's still, there's some attack on the large scale transaction to prove that it's not 100% immutability technology. However, compared to the general computing techniques, I believe that the hash function in blockchain would have to prevent lots of popular attacks, and it can wipe out a large amount of general attacks. So also another big challenge I think lies on the legal challenge. So because blockchain is an emerging technology that requires further research to provide an appropriate legal framework that can effectively manage this type of transaction. And when we implement the DAO into the execution of the transaction, then it raises multiple questions regarding the legal responsibility. For example, if one transaction relates to the, let's say, money laundering organization, then whether the responsibility belongs to DAO itself or the environment is executed or a typical individual is quite hard to define. And so that's why I think this project is the really amazing application of blockchain and quite a lot of potential, but at the same time, a lot of challenge that require further research. So that is my impression about blockchain. I myself believe in blockchain, and I believe that later we can work out the way to resolve on the challenge and make blockchain become, we make out the best of the blockchain to serve our purpose. Thank you.
Love that, Mina. And this is a really great case study for talking around, right? Because what you've done is you've identified a number of the different considerations here on what are the problems we're trying to solve, how does technology address it, and what are the implications of the technology that we choose. So, you know, first and foremost, land registries are typically less digitized, a lot of old paper documentation, and you know, great that you chose the UK. I appreciate that. You know, the country of my birth. So really nice to see a UK example hop up here. And I do know a few people who've been involved in the Digital Street project. So if we've got some questions, we can go back to them and see if we can get some answers to that. You know, for me, blockchain as a ledger, as a tamper-proof ledger, is you know, a technology, it's a capability that we know blockchain is good at. You know, in this particular case, are they looking to digitize and automate paper records? If that's the case, blockchain isn't the only technology that you can use. Are they looking to create the efficiency around the transactions, you know, where you've got multiple parties, a land registry, banks, lenders, individuals, companies? You know, it doesn't feel necessarily like it's a cross-border type of process, right? So you're not dealing with multiple governments, you're not necessarily dealing with multiple international banks. I don't know, actually, might be worth kind of digging into that a little bit more. So the multi-party nature of it is interesting. Immutability in the DAO element, I really like too. You put up a really good point there, because does this process need to be decentralized? Because if you look at a land registry, it's a government authority, it's centralized. You know, you know, there's an authority appointed by the government to do the job of managing the land that is made available. You know, so does this process need decentralization? Possibly not. Does it need automation, efficiency? Absolutely. There's another project that's worth checking out. It's an interestingly named one. It's called Coadjute, and they've been doing some really interesting work at the front end of that process with the solicitors, mortgage lenders for private individuals transactions, to basically to shorten the process of getting the approvals and all of the relevant details to get your mortgage process complete, which is a shared ledger of different approvals and different, you know, completion of transactions, and multi-stage process that everybody needs to understand and have a view of at the same time. That involves multiple banks, that involves handovers of different things over time. You know, and their argument is that if you can reduce that time to approval from kind of 3 months to a few weeks, or maybe even a few days if things go really efficiently, it's really just the admin that gets in the way. And if you can turn around properties quicker, you can get more liquidity in the system, you can get more money flowing, and you can get more deals done. And that's better for everybody. And also, if you want to go in and buy a house, you don't have to wait 3 months. I mean, I've been through, I don't know how many mortgage renewals myself. It's not a fun process. It always feels like a black box. And if you can make more efficiency out of that, happy days. But coming back to the land registry, do go check out Coadjute. Really interested in the work that they're doing. Back to your point here, it raises some really interesting questions. And the fact that they haven't necessarily gone to full blockchain productionization of what they've done suggests that they are in the same quandary. And further minor point to add on top of this, there are other countries in the world where this could be applicable, but there are some other more meaningful challenges, such as, and I'm gonna take Malta as an example, because this example was given to me by some friends who are based in Malta. Not all of the land in Malta is perfectly mapped. So there is a proportion of land which just, there isn't any data in the registry, or there isn't digitization of that onto a registry. So it's sort of a little bit in dispute or contentious, or just not clear that all of the land available is then going to be on the ledger, digitizable, tokenizable if you want to. So you've got an incompleteness problem on top of that as well. And that might be another one that if you're going to go and spend some money, you might want to go and do that one first, right?
Actually, yes, I think actually this project can solve a foreseen problem, is information asymmetry. that's one definitely can resolve it when they implement blockchain solution, provide a more transparent mechanism for all the involved party can access multiple part of information at the same time. And I think it's good help to eliminate the principal agent problem. So yes, it's definitely will deliver some sort of values and contribution.
Yeah, good one. I mean, there's another one, right? Your assessment of this is brilliant, because then the information asymmetry, if you take away the construction industry and the legal industry, estate agents are probably number 3 on that list of people who don't want transparency as well, right? In terms of, they profit off information asymmetry too. So we're starting to understand the potential of this technology, but applying it into places where it's going to be really crunchy to try and get it in. I'm going to pause there because that's a lot of me time. Abhinaw, Troy, any reflections on what Mina's presented? Any kind of thoughts or questions as as you reflect on what's just been said?
I think that the comment I just wanted to make that's quite interesting is just this whole concept, blockchain's entering into, is the idea of the digitization of everything. It's a project that's been going on for a long time, Google, and you've got these sort of collective projects such as in family histories, where they're going around and taking photos of different cemeteries, especially in Ireland, when there's a genealogical gap with records and things like this. So I think it's really interesting. And so coming into Web3 and this notion that now we've got, rather than these distributed server clusters of information in the world, we're looking at the idea of distributing it, more equally around whoever's got the blockchain downloaded. It always makes me think of, I'm excited about all the possibilities around organization, because I can't remember who said it, but I've heard someone say before that blockchain isn't a technology about money or cryptocurrency. It's a technology about organization. And to think we're potentially moving into this next step of organization away from the internet, where information is far more shared, far more transparent, far more potentially accessible. I still can't, in my head, in an abstract way, get out of that matrix green screen with all the code, dripping down in green and all that sort of stuff. So I'd be quite interested in seeing, how these developments are going to come about in a way that is going to be as accessible as the internet is for the common internet user. You know what I mean? And for me, there's still that gap, to get there, and I'm excited to see how that's going to develop over the next couple of years.
100%, and it's got to come from somewhere, right? It's a benevolent government, or it's someone willing to cede control, because a lot of what we're trying to do with blockchain and Web3 is decentralization, disintermediation, and the original role of government in most cases is centralization, command and control. There are some governments that are much better at understanding the role of decentralization. There's a number of countries that are organized very well that way. You look at the Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, and there's a bunch of others. They are naturally leading more in use of blockchain technology in their countries, because the concept of ceding control or equitable use of technology across kind of a decentralized and distributed group of cantons or subgroups of people, these countries were built that way. So it comes more naturally. If you look at the UK, love my country, but at the same time, the original imperial command and control economy. So from my perspective, blockchain has had less of a root in, because it's not really in the national DNA. I hope I'm proved wrong over the longer term on that, but your point is there. What's the incentive? Is it already inherent in the way that countries and organizations are governed, or is there a strong incentive? Back to Abhinaw and the examples around contractors, who's benefiting from getting paid earlier? It's certainly not the cash flow situation of the guys at the top tier. It's the guys at the bottom. So how are we going to get the guys at the top to feel the benefit and get a win-win for everybody in the community, in a way, Troy, like your projects are describing, is where it's clear that everybody benefits from the projects that are being put through. Abhinaw, I'm going to give you kind of a last chance to close us out here. Any thoughts or reflections on what Mina's had to say?
Yeah, thank you for that, Mina. It was really interesting. I've always kind of had this idea about, or read about, blockchain's impact towards property and so on, and this is a very interesting angle towards it. Just a thought that crosses my mind is, when you talk about the land registrations, which kind of, like Anthony mentioned, kind of part of a government organization to kind of oversee it and maintain the records for it. It's just a fact, but what I think of, I don't know if it is the right thought what I'm getting here, but it's like, how you had currency in the beginning as well, which is kind of always the government's responsibility to kind of force or kind of govern the flow of currency and maintain the currency value and so on. But it is always pegged against another external currency, let's say, because in the Middle East is pegged on the US dollar and so on. So I don't know if there is a value in blockchain for land registrations and so on, but then if those records need to be relied on, maybe there might be a case for having a larger network which kind of makes sure that these records are validated or can be relied upon, like how currencies between countries are pegged against each other. I don't know, it's just a thought. So yeah, thanks for that though. Yeah.
Interesting. Yes, I haven't thought about that as well. Thank you for bringing it up. Probably needs to construct another new financial mechanism for typically blockchain transactions.
Brilliant, guys. What an exciting discussion. Genuinely, really well-researched perspectives. Really interesting to hear that you guys are already working on this stuff today, that you're taking a genuine interest in it. And hopefully those listening out there have learned something from this conversation. I certainly have, and I appreciate the diligence and the hard work that you guys have put into preparing. Also, before we close, I've got to give a shout out to Alex Sims from the University of Auckland. She brought us together, an amazing blockchain leader in her own right, doing amazing things out there in New Zealand. So anybody who's listening in, please do go follow Alex, go check out the work that she's doing. Thanks very much, guys, for joining today. Please do keep in touch. Please do keep us updated with your news and stay safe out there.